Welcome to the Launchpad Roundtable powered by Enjinstarter and Trailblaze. On our podcast, we dive deep into the cutting edge world of Web3, where innovation meets opportunity. It is your gateway to the most exciting developments in the blockchain, decentralized technologies, and the future of Launchpads. Each episode will bring together industry leaders, visionaries, and pioneers to discuss the latest trends, challenges, and breakthroughs shaping our ecosystem. So whether you're a seasoned expert or just getting started in this world, the Launchpad Roundtable is where ideas take flight and the future unfolds. Today's topic actually is a super interesting one, and we have special guests with us. Community building, activation, and engagement in Web3, which is quite different from Web2, as you're going to see. So today with us are two people with rich experience in this space. On one side, we have Lady Trader Ra. She's a KOL herself and a thought leader, working in the space for a long, long time. She works with projects and launchpads as a marketing expert, activating KOL campaigns and content strategies, next to also being hosting a lot of shows in the space. And then we have Richard. Richard, a seasoned sales strategist, excels in securing accounts for multi-million-dollar corporations with expertise in diverse sectors, including blockchain, Web3 technologies, and he's co-hosting one of the very cool shows around NFTs at first, but now expanding into all the other verticals with the edge of NFT. Welcome, guys, to the show.
Thank you.
So
Thanks for
much.
having us.
Awesome. So to start off our today's podcast, I would be very curious how you perceive the market at this point in time. Like a lot of founders may see it as a struggle to go through the challenges of early stage community building. Like it's a bit scattered. The tension is not always on point. There's a lot of narratives floating around. So maybe Richard, to start off, can you just give your opinion how you perceive the market? Where is it heading? Like where are we at the moment?
Yeah, so I think that the market is doing what it typically does in every single bull cycle. You have this lead up going into the halvening event, then post halvening event, you have a surge, a pullback, and then basically consolidation before you see the next wave up. History doesn't necessarily repeat, but it rhymes. And there's been a lot of similarities when you put charts over what has historically happened. I'm still very bullish on what the next, let's call it 12 to 15 months look like. I think the market still has much brighter days ahead. There are some different factors that are going into this market cycle where, of course, we now have Bitcoin ETFs that have been approved, Ethereum ETFs that have just been approved, the prospect of Solana ETFs coming in as well. So now you have traditional money coming into all of Web3. And if traditional markets seem to go into another free fall, obviously what just happened post Bitcoin Nashville and everything with that had to do with the Japanese yen and an arbitrage opportunity that happened there. So people needed liquidity. So where'd they go first? Where they were putting their money? Bitcoin ETFs, because it was probably the last money in. So they went and got liquid there to cover their butts on other things that they had going on. So again, I think there's a lot of brighter days ahead, and there's a lot of momentum. A lot of people are eyeing September, October for like the next wave of bullishness to start entering, and I kind of share that sentiment.
Awesome. Yeah, that's very interesting. Like maybe a question for you, Lady Trader, to start off. Like, how do you perceive now the role of ambassadors like you or a KOL to actually maneuver out of this base of the market? Like, do you think it's a pivotal role you can play with obviously all the stakeholders alongside you to make sure that the sentiment comes back and we enter a next runner up?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me up here and all of the good stuff that you guys are doing, Trailblaze team and also Enjinstarter team, my favorite launch pads, of course. So yeah, absolutely. For the KOLs, things have changed a little bit. What has happened is that in the last few months, a lot of KOLs have lost a lot of money when they are whenever they've tried to invest in projects. And the reason why it happens is that a lot of times when people are investing in projects during the bull market, you pretty much know that everything is just going to give you that 10, 20x returns, right? Going back to 2021, that's how it was. Like you could just close your eyes, just enter any idea that's coming up, go to sleep, you'll come back with, 50x, 100x, all of that. So obviously, a lot of that experience has stayed with people, and they're like, okay, now we are again entering the bull cycle. That's how it's going to be again. I'm going to invest my money. But they're not doing the due diligence necessarily, right? Because not every project that's launching is going to have the solid returns that you're looking for. And then also for the key opinion leaders, of course, a lot of them are in Web3 full time. That's their business. And that's not a sustainable model when you're losing money and you're doing marketing for projects at the same time. So I think there's a lot of lessons that people are learning. There is still a lot of frustration. But even through this, like there are good projects that are launching that are doing good. It's just very rare nowadays, right, to get the kind of return that we saw back in 2021. We are not seeing anything like that yet. And there are so many reasons, right, when we start to look into that. There's projects that are launching at higher fully diluted value. The backers are not always there. There are low quality VCs that are supporting the projects that are not known to hold long term. So many factors that tie into that. It's just that people have to be cautious, where they are putting their money. But I think overall, the bullish sentiment will return to the markets. It's just that what Richard was saying about history, I myself, I'm a historical data believer. And what I look for is just the top and the bottom in the markets. That's it. Everything else is the noise. So we just calculate when the bull year is going to be, then we calculate when the bear year is going to be. So whenever we have the Bitcoin halving, right after that, the year after that is the bull year, which means 2025 will be the bull year, which also means end of this year will be pretty bullish as well. And then 2026 will be the bear year. That's how it goes, right? Everything else is noise to me. And so that's how my community also follows the same Bitcoin historical data cycle. But yeah, I think my market sentiments are going to improve. It's just that we need to wait a little bit, start to see when the liquidity starts to come into utility coins, and then we can make a better analysis of what's going to be happening next in the IDO circle.
You said that KOLs lost a lot of money, or they're not very um, they don't trust the system anymore, let's say, because of losing that money. I can imagine if a KOL loses money, that means that also the community that KOL is sharing info to is losing money. Is that correct? And then does the KOL also actually lose their audience when they lose money? Because if I'm following, like, I'm speaking out of my own experience a few years ago, if I follow a KOL and I lose money because I listened to one of those calls, I'm not going to listen to that KOL if he makes 2 or 3 of those calls. So is it even a heavier thing, like not only losing the money because investing themselves, but also losing their audience? Or is that a step too far?
No, 100%. I agree with you what you said. There is definitely that factor as well, which is why, like myself, I am very, very cautious about what I'm bringing to my community, because I know whenever I write content about somebody or whenever I do an alpha call in my Telegram community, that there are going to be people who will be participating in that. Whenever I say, hey, this is what I'm buying, everybody's going to jump on it and say, okay, we need to be in it as well. And what happens is that as a KOL, you have to be cautious. Like I have to say no to a lot of projects, because if I bring everything to my community, there's going to be 50% of those projects are going to rug, and my community is going to be super mad. So there's obviously, you have to say no to them. You have to do your due diligence, make sure that when you look at the backers, if you have the top tier backers for every project that you bring to your community, you know that those are solid backers. You've done your due diligence, you've talked to the team, and you have gotten to know them. You understand what the founders' visions are, and now you're putting that information in front of the community, and then still letting them know that, hey, just do your own research. That kind of takes some of that off, some of that responsibility, of course, off of your shoulder, because you've done such a great job already filtering out the projects. But then again, what we also need to realize is sometimes projects are going to take a while to deliver the kind of ROI you're looking for, right? It's not going to be like overnight 10x. I have seen projects right now that are launching that have solid fundamentals, right? But after the launch, they didn't do really good. Communities lose money, KOLs lost money, right? KOLs are upset, like, hey, I didn't get my return on it. I lost money. Now I need a refund. It's like, guys, we know when we invest money, right? Either you don't invest money, or when you invest it, you just have to be sure that there is a certain level of due diligence you've done, and you understand that this is a risky business, right? And so either that you change the business model entirely, which obviously I have, or you stick to those rules that, the investment rules basically. But I think at the end of the day, it's just understanding the fact that Not everything is going to give you overnight returns. Sometimes there are projects that are going to take a while to give you those 100x or more, but it's going to take time. There are solid fundamentals behind a project, solid team, solid product, solid community. Then those projects are going to succeed long term. You just have to be patient.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And actually, it leads a bit to a question. You mentioned KOLs are not really determining the market trends, right? Like you're like assessing what's there, you put it out there if you believe in it, and then things happen. So, out of your perspective, maybe Richard first, like who is leading the market trends? Who needs to step up now to actually bring back the sentiment? Or is it even a stakeholder who can do this? Or is it just like the fundamentals which just play the role and no one can really do anything about it and just needs to wait?
When most people think and talk about the market, they're looking at two big numbers, right? They're looking at Bitcoin, they're looking at Ethereum, maybe they're looking at Solana, right? So if those are your true market movers and everything else falls underneath, then if, for example, when Bitcoin was falling off a cliff, even when Bitcoin was going down, there were still some projects that were going up. So when you look at the entire market, even though some projects were doing well in that moment, Bitcoin was falling down, Ethereum goes down from 3,000 all the way down to 22. And you'd say, oh man, like what just happened? But again, in that same moment, you still had other projects that went up during that moment. So you have to look at like, okay, projects versus entire market sentiment. So I just want to like make that like distinction first around market distinction of market sentiment usually is Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, maybe someone else that's in like the top 10, and then like everyone else. So when we look at what's going to lead the next charge, honestly, Bitcoin's going to continue to do that as Bitcoin starts to retracing its all-time highs, go into new all-time highs. Ethereum starts doing the same. Solana starts doing the same. That's when everyone starts thinking like, oh, cool, this is our moment. That's when you start seeing these 10, 25 plus X's on other projects because they're saying, okay, cool, the market is starting to go up. Now I have faith that if I invest in some of these lower cap opportunities, I have security in doing that. Because what do a lot of traders potentially do is as they lever into some of these other projects and they start to get those returns, they usually don't keep them there. They either move them to a stable coin or they roll them back into Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, whatever else their staple is. And so I think people need to, like, going back to something that Lady Trader Ross said that I really want to emphasize is in no other market besides crypto can someone invest in something and expect it to 10x in a week. If you were to invest in any other subset, stuff takes time. That we're so hyper focused in Web3 to have instant returns that people aren't looking at the full vision of these massive returns that can happen over time with patience, with time. So when you go and do your due diligence, you look at the VCs that are involved in the projects and do they hold? Do they actually believe in the longevity of a company? If you were to invest in any company and you really want it to have sustained value, you want this company to have some sort of 5 to 10 year plan of being around and creating something. Whereas some projects are just like, hey, I'm just trying to make as much money as quickly as possible, which again is fine and is its own subset. But you have to know if you're investing in that, that's what you're signing up for. So again, just going to projects that are truly building for that future and trying to have sustained value. The overnight instant success happens in true bull market form, and that's coming. Those days are coming. You're basically money in, money out, like it goes up, right? Everything goes up. We're not in that moment right now. We're still in, hey, who are the companies that are ready for this next cycle? How are they going to be able to survive through this bull and survive into the bear? And I think those companies that are like, hey, I'm here for the long run, finding those gems are where you start to find some of those outgained opportunities that still exist.
Yeah, and I think the Bitcoin ETFs, they fooled a bit the whole scene, right? Like it made it look like we're more ahead in the cycle, even though it's just the institutional money coming in. And that might also have triggered a lot of pockets to be deploying capital into projects without being so careful because they expect, okay, everything is rising out right now. But it was a bit too early.
I just want to add one more thing to that point. Sorry, just for a second. With the traditional money coming in, when you have BlackRock and these other huge institutions that have billions of dollars that they're pouring into something, because their goal is to try to get 8 to 10% each year, as they start investing at a certain point, and that's their new cost basis, they're never going to let their price go down below a certain point. And if they do, they're going to completely pull out. And if they're investing in Bitcoin, they're not looking to pull out. They're looking at this as a long-term investment that's going to have returns. So as Bitcoin eventually does start going up to these new thresholds and starts becoming, to the 80,000, 90,000, 100,000, whatever it is, and more traditional money comes in, whatever that cost basis is, the floor starts to get higher and higher. So we're not going to see these gigantic 90%, 80%, 60% retracements in Bitcoin like we have traditionally seen. The retracements are going to be much smaller because, again, traditional money that's coming in, they can't afford to have that type of retracement. So they're going to probably, as prices start coming back down, either be buying up or stabilizing the position. So I think this next cycle might potentially be our last true super cycle that we see. So I think this next bull cycle might be one of the most significant that we're probably going to see in Web3. And that's probably one of my hot takes.
I want to touch upon that point. First of all, the original question was like when we analyze the market sentiment, and we jumped straight into crypto and the crypto sentiment with the Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana. But if we zoom out a bit, I think that also has quite a big impact is the general macroeconomy, right? Where people have a risk on or risk off mindset. And all these macro factors that play into that. We've seen stocks, or at least the top stocks, ripping the past months, just as Bitcoin. They even outperformed some of them. So all of these things are tied in, and I think though that's like if investors are waiting to go risk on again, that's also when the crypto space in general will follow, and then you'll see indeed the bigger movers as a measure of the sentiment.
Actually, I have one thing before we move a bit deeper into kind of the subject of how a founder can maneuver these early phases of getting out there, because we see recently a lot of different discussions around how should you actually shape a product or a tokenomics. And we talk about, okay, we need high float, low FTV. There have been kind of the opposite in the last cycles, which was triggering these high X multipliers. Do you guys think with these new trends, like maybe even community first projects, which are built organically with more patience, are we still seeing these rewards? Or is it shifting a bit to more like the traditional kind of expectations? Was like, okay, I'm happy with 3x in 2 months. Is it even possible to go back to these kind of numbers?
I can chime in here. When it comes to IDOs, FDVs play a very important role, right? Initial market cap, all of those numbers are important. If there is a project that does deliver a really awesome product, like we saw My Pet Hooligans that launched on Coinbase, right? And they did great. I was actually an investor in that project, and I think it did like over 50x or something like that. It was a phenomenal number. And so when we have projects that have solid teams, solid launch strategy, they could do good numbers even in the markets that we are in currently, right? That's definitely a fact. Now, are we going to see the kind of returns we saw last bull market? I mean, I saw some ideas going 1500x. Uh, you know, and that means they were launching at a pretty small market cap initially, right? Had solid strategy, did not go too big with the fundraising efforts. All of those things are important. But I think where the shift is going to happen, this is my prediction for this bull market, is that a lot of people are going to say, what's already launched that has a solid fundamental behind it? What kind of tokens in circulation are out there? If there is a project that's over 50% in circulation already, or maybe 100%, and it has solid fundamentals and it has a solid team, and they have a product that's good for adoption, then investors are going to put their money there because it is the least amount of risk, right? That's what you're looking at. And then second, I think for the upcoming projects, and then also some of the launch projects are going to be those smaller community focused projects, and I'm seeing quite a bit of those right now. Working with one of the teams right now that are not going the traditional IDO round. They did not go with VCs. They have teams from like Binance, team members from Binance, and a lot of other areas, Bybit, and like big names involved. And then they are saying, we don't need money from institutions. We are going to go with a different launch strategy. We are going to be selectively onboarding KOLs that are good, that are solid, that are going to hold their tokens and not sell it on their communities. And we are going to launch these projects, but we do not need funding from anyone that's going to potentially hurt the project, because we know our product is so awesome that we already have or building customers. We don't need any of that other money. We are going to be self-funding because we are successful businessmen and we know what we are doing. That's the approach that I'm seeing actually with quite a few teams already. And I think those are the kind of projects that we also need to be watching besides the traditional IDOs. And I'm an IDO queen. I am in the IDO world so much. I have to be part of pretty much every launchpad in some capacity, keep in touch with what's going on with every launchpad that's out there. But I think we also cannot ignore the fact that there's going to be some of these projects that will be launching. I mean, Pal AI was one example. Look at what they've done with such a solid community, right? Look at what they've done with their token. They did not do VC funding at all. They just selectively onboarded pretty solid KOLs. They had awesome advisors from the get go, awesome launch strategy, and a product that everybody wants to use, to the point that every project wants to collaborate with them just to get part of their community share. So there is just so much that's happening right now. And that's what I wanted to say, that we need to focus on those utility based coins that are out there and that will be launching as well.
Yeah, very good insights into your world, Lady Trader. It shows us how much importance founders should put on this topic community in a Web3 venture. Like, it's a bit different in Web2, right? Many companies in Web2 who start out don't really need a community. So it's a very special aspect of the Web3 world. I think it's interesting to discuss how pivotal it is. Like, is it priority one to build a community, or is it still depending on the project's nature of business or the business model itself? Like, a couple of tokens are B2B tokens, but still they build communities because they see the importance. Richard, do you think community building is the number one thing a founder should consider at the start and from the start, even before going out and raising a seed round?
I think community is essential and on various. One, your community is helping you to refine your product, whatever it is that you are building and trying to solve for. When you have your test net, what is the first thing you need? People to actually go on your test net and try it out. Even from there, before you go to mainnet, you need to be able to refine and understand, like, what is it that we're trying to solve for? How do we improve it? And how is the community actually going to use this thing that we've been building forever? And then you also want to be able to reward your community for helping you refine all of these things and encourage other people to join. But there's ways that you can potentially mess up your community if you use tactics potentially like airdrops. I'm going to give one quick example. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with like Starknet. Starknet launched recently back in like March. They started pretty high, like $2.70, and the price today is close to 40 cents. And one of the challenges that happened with that, they spent all this time building this product, building community, and then they did this airdrop that gave a lot of liquidity to a lot of people that necessarily weren't hardcore in their community. What did a lot of these people do? They dumped. And so once they dumped, the community that they had built and done all this stuff with, it's like, hey, I've been here grinding away with you guys for all this time. This happens. It was so bad that the CEO recently stepped down, like I think a week or two ago. And now they're trying to reposition, do other stuff. And so I only say that antidote to say that your community is very important, but you also want people who believe in the long-term vision. Like, there's going to be traders that come and see an opportunity. They want to make their money. They're in, they're out. They're not really part of your community. They're here to make money. And that's fine. Part of the reason of being in crypto is people want the financial freedom and the financial opportunities that it presents. But it doesn't mean that they're truly core to your community and trying to see you thrive and diamond hand and see you into the promised land of what you're trying to build. They are an essential part of coming and join the community, seeing what you're about, and hey, what's the retention, right? Like, why would somebody come in your community and why would they want to hold on? Why would they want to stay? Why do they want to keep being here? Or are they passing through, right? They come in, they see the community. I don't really like this. Let me get out of this position. Let me keep moving. Having a reason for people to stay, having a way for people to buy into what you're ultimately building, that's what adds the value. That's what you see, like, things build over time. And there's a lot of ways to get in front of people. IRL, going to a lot of these in-person events helps a ton. One company I think that's been doing well, in full disclosure, is a client of Edge of is BitLayer. BitLayer is a Bitcoin layer 2 scaling solution, and they've been building up their ecosystem. They just finished raising an $11 million round, and they're everywhere, like all of the major events. And by doing that, they've been able to talk to a ton of different VCs and get them to understand what they're building and why they would want to invest. They've also been in front of people that want to work and build on top of their ecosystem, where they've been doing grants and helping other people come on board and building out their X account to exponentially grow over the next several months. And it's been cool to see them both in real life and virtually, growing their community and providing that value back to showing why you would want to be part of this journey. So I just want to give a couple of examples of like how community can be both good and bad, and how people are putting in different marketing tools and how it can be both positive and destructive depending on how you do it.
You touched upon my first hot take that I wanted to share later on, but I'll share it now, and maybe also to get Lady Trader's comments on it. But it's exactly what you said. It is relying on incentives like airdrops or token rewards might build a large community quickly, but often attracts opportunists rather than long-term believers. Lady Trader, do you think that's correct? And what is this still a good way to build a large community, airdrops and these promises, or are there better ways in your opinion?
I think we have to find a balance, right? Airdrops are great, of course, but then when you talk about the longevity of the project and then also like the long-term success, I think what we need to look at is number one that I feel is lacking most of the time. Number one reason why communities are weak is because of the lack of thought leadership coming from the founders themselves, right? That's what keeps good investors away, investors who are going to be in your project for the fundamental reasons and they don't mind holding for long term to get some of the returns. And that thought leadership is lacking pretty much across the board, which is a very unfortunate situation that we are in. I will give you one example. So going back to 2021, when you're starting to look at AI projects that are just coming out, then like for myself, the one person that I really looked up to was Dr. Ben Goertzel of SingularityNet. He was the CEO of SingularityNet. If you know what thought leadership should be like, that's the guy you need to look up to. He's always talking about AI, solid thought leadership, right? About everything that he says. His projects reflect that as well. Every time I had a question or I wanted to know what's going on in AI and blockchain, I would just go look up what Dr. Ben Goertzel is saying. That's the guy that I need to watch out and see what he's talking about. That's going to be the next big thing. And that was like such, and that kind of solid thought leadership is what brings investors in, right? Like I'm a Singularity Net ecosystem girl. Like I have to be in every Singularity Net ecosystem project in some capacity. And so, and I'm an investor in their ecosystem as well, and also a close advisor, which, back then I was not an advisor. I was not working closely with their team, but their thought leadership was so phenomenal. It was always like on my mind, right? And nowadays, what happens is that founders are, first of all, too busy to communicate with the community. Second, their social media posts are absolutely horrible nowadays, thanks to ChatGPT. Takes a second to create a Twitter post. And that's what's going out there. People are not putting in the effort. Founders are not going out there, putting themselves out there and talking about their vision and their expertise. That's not happening, unfortunately, right? And those are key factors that would make or break your project. And going back to SingularityNet, I will tell you there are other AI projects too. I didn't know who their founders were. I did not care. Yes, I had some positions in it, but it didn't really matter to me because their thought leadership was not as strong as Dr. Ben Goertzel's. And what ended up happening is, and some people would even ask, what about this project or what about that project? I'm like, yeah, those are good projects too. Don't get me wrong, but this one is solid. We gotta, like, Dr. Ben Goertzel, he's the guy. And then what ended up happening, a few of the projects, top AI projects, actually merged together this year, and they basically became one big coin, and it's again led by who? Dr. Ben Goertzel. Because I guess no one can deny that he has that solid thought leadership, which brings community, which brings investors. So we need founders who can be the experts in their field and provide that thought leadership that the community needs. Put yourself out there. It's not, I understand, like, yes, you're raising funds, you're doing all of these things, which is great. We are doing marketing, but hey, sometimes you got to delegate. What's most important is your expertise, and community needs to hear from you. If you're not putting yourself out there, forget it. You're not going to have that kind of community. And you're seeing even right now, like I'm in one of the projects that I'm part of as a key opinion leader and a close advisor, solid thought leadership in gaming. Gaming category right now is getting crushed. And that's a category where you need some solid thought leadership, where you need founders to put themselves out there and say, hey, this is what I'm building, this is why, and be like heavily involved. And it reflects in their social media content. They're doing a very different content strategy. It reflects in what they're building. It reflects in their community and the support that they get. all of those things. And so I think number one thing is, founders, if you're listening to this, put yourself out there, talk to your community, give updates. Don't disappear because you're busy, because your community has put trust in you and invested in your project, and has joined your community to be a part of. Be out there, lead them. That's important.
I couldn't agree more with what you say, especially with the founders thing and the founders thought leadership and personal branding. I noticed this throughout the bear market when I was looking more into startups, Web3 as well as Web2 and SaaS. And I was noticing that company profiles people don't really trust anymore. It's a general thing in the content creator space where like content creators are being trusted more than actual company pages. And this ties in with what Lady Trader says as well, where the founder should actually come out of their shell and share all the updates. You see Elon Musk doing this as a perfect example, or like Sam Altman, for example. He makes announcements. It's not OpenAI, and those reach people.
I just want to add on to that, to both of your points, Rick and Lady Trader Raw. Leadership by far helps with creating the aura of these guys know what they're talking about. And if they know what they're talking about, they're building a team around them who also know what they're doing. And then you can have confidence that, hey, what we're building, we're going to do it. Because one of the challenges that comes up, you have a lot of people that talk a really big game, but don't necessarily produce the results, and they don't come with the consistency. But if someone is consistently, if again, going back to IRL events, people are going there for thought leadership, networking, and for business development. And if you see the same people talking over and over again, it's just like within marketing, right? You need to see or hear from someone 7 to 9 times before you're like, I've seen you. I hear what you're saying. Let me pay attention now. Let that resonate. And so if you can get those different touch points, whether it's IRL, virtually, whether that's through a podcast, a Twitter space, through a tweet that someone did, or if you're going through LinkedIn and you see like, oh, they just posted on this thing, whatever it is, you get enough of those touch points, you believe like, hey, they know what they're talking about, and you buy into that. And because a lot of people forget, crypto projects, cryptocurrency, or blockchain startups. What do we know about startups? 90% fail. But for the startup community, the ones that last and do really well, when you're first investing in these projects, you're investing in the people. You have to believe that these people are the ones that can actually execute on the things that they are proposing. And so I just want to echo how important strong thought leadership and creating that value through content truly is.
Yeah, truly insightful. Maybe just to take one step back, let's assume I'm a founder, having my idea, maybe validated this idea with the stakeholders I want to serve. I feel like, okay, now is the time to actually accelerate. So I want to go out there, build my community, start my race. Can you disclose a bit out of your perspective, what is the best practice to actually start this endeavor? Would you start with thought leadership, as you just mentioned, as a key item, which is the key activity a founder should do to keep people engaged and trusting you? What's the first steps you do? What tools can you use? And how will you approach this build up from the start? Let's assume we're on zero.
Yeah, absolutely. I can chime in because I do work very, very closely with a lot of founders and projects early on. And this is one area where we focus on quite a bit is the thought leadership. And I always encourage the founders to put themselves out there, right? There are always discussions when they turn into, hey, I'm too busy. I'm doing X, Y, and Z. And it's like, yes, you're doing X, Y, and Z, but no one is looking at it. Your community doesn't know that. You are doing all of these great things in the background, but you got to put yourself out there. That is the main thing, right? You got to go talk to your community. That's what you need to be doing. And maybe some of these other things in the background can be handled by other people, right? You don't need to be on every call. Obviously some calls are important, but you need to focus on what's important, and you're the face of the project, so you better be that face of the project. And so we have that discussions all the time whenever I'm working closely with the founders. And that's another thing too, like about myself. Obviously I'm a key opinion leader, but I'm so much more than that. I'm not just a regular Twitter shiller who's going to put content out there and say, hey, we are going to the moon. It's more about supporting the teams long term. And I still keep in touch with some of the teams that I had consulted back in 2021 and in the last bull market. And sometimes they'll reach out and say, hey, I got to pick your brain. Are you available? And it's like, sure, let's jump on a call. Let's talk. What's going on? It's about that network and making sure that you are building those solid relationships, putting people over profit. That is important to me as a KOL, as a Web3 consultant. But whenever I'm working with the founders, one thing I say is be honest. Like, you are building this product for a reason. And people need to know why you're doing this. There's so much more than this, so much more to this than just raising money. Of course, there are founders who are just like, hey, you know what? Give me the money. They'll raise a whole bunch of funds. They'll move on right after the project launches. It's like you never hear from them again. Project is rugged. It's gone. That happens a lot too, right? Some people who are just motivated by money, they don't care about anything else. But if you're building a solid product, talk about that, right? Talk about your expertise in the industry. How many of us know, like, there are founders out there who are building good products right now that have solid projects, but what do we know about their background? Like, most of us don't know unless like we were to do research. Now, if they were putting those things out there already, that hey, I have expertise in this and this, I have accomplished this, but I also take an active position into these matters, and these things are important to me, these are my values, I think people will listen, right? Look at Dr. Ben Gertzel, for example. Sometimes the guy would say something that is not, it's like it's going to make you think twice, like, oh my god, is this where we are headed? Like when he talks about artificial general intelligence, you're like, what is he talking about? Is AI going to take over? Is my job gone now? Like, that's what a general person would respond to, like a regular everyday person. But he's taking a very active stance, and he's explaining to people, he's educating people, right? So as a thought leader, it is your goal, it is your job to educate people. As a key opinion leader, it is your job to educate people, give them all the sides and say, this is what I'm seeing fundamentally, this is what's strong. It goes the same way for the thought leadership coming from the founders. Talk about your expertise, talk about the markets, tell us what you are building, what you are delivering, what your vision is, what your mission is, what your thoughts are, what are your opinions. Like, I just put it out there for me to learn from you. And we don't see that. And then it's just like, yep, every day you're posting something taken from Chat GPT. Where is your founder? Why is he not talking? But I think whenever I'm working with projects closely, I do remind them of that. And Trailblaze team, I mean, you guys are a prime example. Like, I've seen the leadership being out there constantly in AMAs and things like that. Same with Enjinstarter. Like, it's the CEO shows up to the AMAs of projects. It's like, that's great. He's putting himself out there. So that's the kind of leadership that we want to see more of. Don't just hide behind the shadows. Be out there. And yeah, I think that's what makes a project successful.
You mentioned founder many times. Can it also be done by other team members, or should it really be the face of the project?
I think it can be done by other team members as well. But why I said founders is because, like, he has the vision behind the project. There's a reason why he founded the company. And that vision needs to be communicated very clearly to the people, to the point where you build a relationship with community, that community is like, hey, we are behind you 100%. We don't care about the market conditions. We don't care about our 100x return tomorrow. We are going to be part of this because we believe in your vision. You founded this company. And that's what creates a healthy chart too, right? And so, because the founders are putting themselves out there, I think that is important. Of course, other team members need to be out there, but I get a lot of complaints whenever I'm working. This is a super secret thing. I'm not going to call out anyone here. But what happens is that whenever I'm working closely with the team, a lot of times team members are coming to me and they're confiding in me and they're telling me, we don't know what XYZ is doing. The CEO, we don't know what he's doing. He's never around. He's not really doing things that he's supposed to do. He just leaves and we are doing all of these things, and really we don't know what to do. He's not leading us. So that kind of lack of leadership is not only seen publicly but also privately, and the team suffers the consequences of that, right? So you want to make sure you're not doing this to your team and you're not doing this to your community. That happens a lot, unfortunately. It's not like every project is doing that. Most, like, half of them are not, but there are half of them that are doing this. So if you are that project, that you're that founder who just relies on their team for every little thing, at least be out there, lead your team, create good leaders, mentor them. And a lot of times when you're mentoring good enough, you don't need to lead. I have my team members too. As a key opinion leader, I have a team of people that works underneath me, and they support me, so I support the projects. It should be the same way. Your team supporting you so you can support the community, not the other way around where you just give everything to your team and say, go do this and done. No, your team should be supporting you and the company, and you should be supporting the community. You should be out there. That's my take on it anyway. My opinion, I know it's a little bit different, right? Different opinion from what a lot of people believe in, but just had to put it out there.
All right. Thank you very much. That's very clear. You tapped on one thing that is also one of the hot takes, but I'm going to ask one more question before we ask that one. I am a founder. That's roleplay. I'm the founder. I have an idea. I have no following and no project built yet. What do I do first?
I think you first need to go and build, well, before you fully build your project, I think you need to have at least a rough outline of what you're trying to accomplish. And then you need to go and user test it. So share it out there like, hey, this is what I'm looking at. This is what I'm leaning on. Get some feedback, because you can go put together this amazing idea in your head, but then you go and test it against the market. And then they're like, I don't want this, or I don't need this, or like, doesn't this already exist? So having a rough outline of what you're trying to do, and then you don't need to go give it to the whole world, but like maybe some trusted people in your community, or a few randos out there too, that you're like, hey, this is what I'm thinking about building. What do you think? Get some of that feedback. You can then take that feedback and then really start to build out phase one, right? And then from there, you start to go and do all the next steps. Test it again, get some more user feedback. And then after you've refined it down a little bit more, now you can decide like, okay, do I want to turn this into an actual business? And I myself have gone through many startups. I've gone through some different accelerator programs, and it's like the age old question of what do you do first? And ultimately, before you go and put all this energy into building a business, which is very hard, you need to understand your product, your service, whatever it is. Does the market even really want it? Because if you're going to go and dedicate all these time, money, resources into this thing, you need to first understand like, are you actually building something that is wanted or needed? And after you have that, you then have the energy and the validation to move forward with all the next steps with, all right, let's go build the newsletter, let's go get the community, let's go raise the money, all the other things. So that's the first steps that I would take.
Maybe just to add up on this topic, was I think for many founders, initially they're motivated to voice and give their opinion out to the market, and then they see and perceive like, okay, I got 6 views, I get 2 likes, and after 2 months of doing this, it's still kind of very neglectable kind of impact for what effort they put. And then there is opportunities maybe of other parties which offer exposure, AMAs, live spaces. You need to pay for this, get exposure through other communities and kind of ramp up a bit of visibility. Do you have any hints like how the founder can understand if the value is there, taking such an opportunity of a third party? Because I think many want to go into this route, but then they struggle because it's such a Wild West environment where everyone promises you big engagement numbers, big results, and in the end, it's a lottery ticket to take. So, like any indicator you look at to put kind of a rank on a proposal?
Yeah, I'll answer this pretty briefly. KPI, so your key performance indicator, like what success looks like for each person is very different. Earlier, we talked about thought leadership. In some scenarios, just establishing yourself as a thought leader is creating content, having things out there that prove like, hey, we are thought leaders. Here's content information that we've made. And that's when working with some of these third parties can be helpful with doing that. Other KPIs are like, hey, we need users. So like if we have this new test net and we need like 1,000 new people to come and actually do this before we go to mainnet to like test this, like how do we go get those 1,000? So that's a new KPI. We're like, hey, we need to make sure that if you have this 10 to 100,000 people are coming to our thing, we need to retain 1,000 of them. Can you help us with that retention? So now you have like a hard number that you can go and go against. But even with that, if you're not able to retain that, let's say you use one company or another, if they're not able to do that for you, then that means that you have a bigger problem, which is your product's not sticky, or there's something missing in that too. So understanding like what is it that you're actually trying to solve for, or have a result against, and being very clear on that distinction before going in asking for these additional like services or help, it's going to save you a lot of time and money. So that's what I would say. Like your KPI, know what you're trying to accomplish before you go and spend the money.
My key takes are that when it comes to community building and starting that thought leadership, you definitely need to put yourself out there and also be active in other communities that are similar. There is, I always say in Web3, there's one thing, there's not really as much competition as there is collaboration, right? That is a key factor. This is what we are doing essentially. You have two big launch pads, Trailblaze, Enjinstarter, like you guys working together. There is no competition. There is deal sharing. There is collaboration. This is what's happening. And so whenever we see these kind of collaborations, it's always great to witness the results of that. And so if you're a founder, look at who else is out there. Let's say you're an AI project. What other AI projects are out there that you can team up with, that you can collaborate with? Maybe there are things that you can take from their project, maybe features or product, and maybe they can use your product in some ways, right? Team up, which is what Palei is doing. They have partnered with so many projects, absolutely insane. That's what we want to see more of, where communities are relying on other communities as well. That's what we are here for. It's not going to be just one project that everybody wants to invest in. It's not a sports where there's one team that you cheer for and then the others are the losers that you don't care about. In this one, we are all here to win, and every project can win. And the stronger the collaboration, the better it is for both communities, or more than two communities. And I think that is important. This is when you team up with other founders and say, okay, what are you doing? I want to meet with you. Network, right? Reach out to them, set up calls, meet with them. And then if you're a new founder, right? If you're still building your thought leadership, go out there, put yourself out there, talk to other people, and then set up AMAs and co-marketing and show your expertise. Because sometimes what you have to do is you show up and utilize a platform that's already built, that's solid, so you can showcase your expertise, and that's how you can build your following. People hear you and they say, yes, what this guy is saying, it makes sense. Let's bring him in more. And then maybe other people will start reaching out. And especially nowadays, like there are so many AMA platforms and things like that where you can speak with and just become part of the panel, all of those things. I mean, there's so much that's happening just on Twitter itself. You can do the same thing on YouTube. And you can, of course, if no one is doing that, let's say you have 4 founders that you know that, okay, these guys, whenever they post something on their Twitter, it makes sense. I'm going to reach out to all 4 of them and I'm going to set up an AMA with them on my page. I'm going to do that. Then go ahead and do it if they're not already doing it, right? You have to take initiative, and that is important. You can't, like, people are not going to cook your food, plate it for you, spoon feed you, and then also wipe your face. Like, you got to do something on your own.
That was
Take
a very
initiative.
good metaphor. Yeah. No, I think in conclusion, the answer to my question was actually like, don't pay, grind, right? Like you can make your way through. You just need to think and be smart and be out there, grind, put the hours, and then you don't even need a budget. You can still get a lot of attention, visibility in the space just by being there and being the expert on this theme, which supposedly should be interesting for the market and the audience to listen to.
So we talked a lot about founders from the moment they have an idea or once they start building a project, building that initial community. But what if a founder did all this and they got their community, the product just launched? How are they going to keep that community engaged? How should they do that? Keep a community engaged, but also maybe even grow the community once there's no incentives to give them anymore.
And
This
to
is
add up
actually
on this, actually, the follow up is also how to convert them into business, right? Like having a community is one, an engaged community is another, but then having business clients is kind of the last step, which the companies should take. Otherwise, like, where's the monetization at?
I think that's again when I would just go back to thought leadership from the founder, so right, or other team members as well. But showing the community that you are still out there. So I'll give you one example of what happened back in 2021 and 2022. Lots of people have invested in projects. 2022 comes, bear market hits, project teams disappear, like Twitter dead, right? Because the bear market fatigue hits them. Then there are projects that are actually building during the bear market. They have leaders that are talking, they're giving updates to their investors. And those are, believe it or not, projects that I invested in and my community invested in, because we were like, hey, they got super active Twitter account. Look at what they're doing. Look at all of this stuff that they're doing. It's so cool. Let's join them. Let's figure it out. Let's invest. That was actually one of our approach. And it did pay off pretty good. And then we were also able to avoid projects. Some of them were pretty solid projects that we remembered from 2021 and before. And we were like, you know what? Their Twitter is dead. They're not doing anything. Forget them. We are not going anywhere near this project because they are not active. They have shown that they are not responsible. We are not putting our money there, right? So that was one thing. But you got to keep engaging with your community. You got to give updates. You got to do AMAs. You got to do marketing, right? And you got to continue doing that. And then you got to do cross collaboration with other projects at the same time. Build those meaningful partnerships, deliver good results. Talk about numbers. Like, how many founders are talking about their revenue? We have this cool product. We got these many people signed up. What about your revenue? What happened to that, right? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the numbers that actually matter, and then engage with your community on a regular basis. Like, have a regular AMA, maybe if you have a Discord or Telegram, talk to them. Even maybe even reach out to some of your active community member in DM and say, hey, you know what, I see what you're doing. You're talking about my project. Thank you for doing that. Do you have any questions? You are always free to reach out to me. I mean, when you put people over profits are going to follow. Do you know how many investors actually say, hey, this project, it has a very solid team, and I've talked to their founder and he reached out to me. I mean, he's a great guy. I'm going to support him because, I talked to him. I'm really happy with what he's delivering. Just have to put yourself out there, build that community, talk to your community. It's not just your community manager's duty to build that community. You got to be there too. You got to support your community manager, right? Those are important factors, I think. Just continue to put out updates, put yourself out there.
I love it. Unfortunately, guys, time is flying by. It's such an interesting conversation, and our guests, unfortunately, have other duties to take. So I would suggest that we kind of go into the final takes of this conversation. Maybe, Richard, like, what is the last statement you want to get out there for a founder striving for success?
Yeah, being a founder is hard, and building a community takes time, but it's all doable. A lot of it's energy and effort and consistency. And eventually you get to a point where you've built the community, you've done the consistent things, you've got the incentives in place, and you don't necessarily know what that next step is. We at Edge of are really good with those next steps on creating those paths and doing all of those things. So if you are in that crossroads and need some help, we're here to help. Feel free to reach out to me if you need that. And I appreciate you both for having me. And Lady Trader Rock, great hearing your takes today as well.
Thanks very much for this, Richard. Yeah, off to you, Lady Trader. Do you have any last comments? You shared so much value, both of you. It was such executable steps which you proposed. I think people listening to the show really understand how to start and how to continue. But maybe there's a last statement of you as well, just before we close the call.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us here. And Richard, it was great also hearing all of your opinions on it as well. But I think at the end of the day, what I would like to say is that, bring in the experts to help you if you're not sure, right? Talk to people who have done it before. Talk to the leaders of the communities who have built solid communities, right? Learn from them, and then bring in the experts, right? Bring in people like Richard, bring in people like myself to help you if you have questions, like most of us, we are ready to help, right? Even if you send us a DM, you have quick questions, do it. And all it takes is really just that initial first step where you just make an active effort. Be out there no matter what happens, like in the market. If you're founding a project, launching a project, when bear market hits, still be available. Answer questions, update your community, don't just go away. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for inviting me to this conversation. It was great.
And if there's one quote that's been mentioned at least twice by Lady Trader today, and that can describe this episode very well, I think it's people over profit. It's been mentioned twice or three times, and I think that was a very good one. It applies on everything in business, but also in community, right? We all here trying to make money together. If the founders, if the teams put people over profit, then we can achieve that. And I think that's a good one to end this episode. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time, for your knowledge. And see you next time.